the brand new NERF Hyper. We have it. We have all of it. The ammo, the NERF Hyper Rush 40, the NERF Hyper Siege 50, and of course, the NERF Hyper Mach 100. We're going to unbox it. We're going to put it over the chronograph to see how hard they hit. We're going to take it outside and range test it to compare it to NERF's other offerings. And of course, hopefully answer the one question, is NERF Hyper worth getting hyped about? I'm Walcom S7, and I want to thank Hasbro for giving me the opportunity to show off their brand new ammo type and their 3 new initial launch blasters in the NERF Hyper line. Hasbro may have sent it to me free of charge, but of course my opinions are completely my own. But before any of that, let me know what you think about NERF Hyper down in the comment section below. Are these 3 new NERF offerings enough to get you to buy into an entire new ammo ecosystem? And while you're headed down that way, please hit the like button if you like content like this, and of course, get subscribed because obviously I have 3 new blasters and a whole new ammo type that I get to experiment with, so there's gonna be some really cool things on the horizon.
It's spherical! Spherical!
I'm seriously opening this on camera so you can tell that this is my first actual look at NERF Hyper. Blaster roll call! The NERF Hyper Rush 40. It's got a little ball right here. It's that's not foam, that is rubber. And they even show you the rounds in here. It's called the Rush 40, but it only comes with 30 rounds. 40 round capacity, 30 included rounds. I'm not a mathematician, but that does not equal that. Hopper feed, 40 round capacity, 50 round reload canister not included. In fact, the only claim it makes is the extreme speed of up to 110 FPS, and of course we will test that. NERF Hyper Siege 50. Kind of the same exact thing. In fact, still says up to 110 FPS, does include eyewear, and does only contain 40 rounds despite advertising it has a capacity of 50. This one does have slamfire and advertises a 100 round reload canister. That is, of course, not included. And last but certainly not least, the Mach 100, which comes with 80 hyper rounds and requires 6D batteries, which I did pick up for the sake of this review, and they were expensive, so please hit that like button for the love of everything. They are very, very expensive. Fully motorized, 50 round reload canister, not included, and easy reload, and this one also claims up to 110 FPS. So let's start where it's logical. We can't talk about the blasters without talking about the new Hyper round. You can think of the NERF Hyper round as a miniature version of Rival, the short dart version of NERF Rival. And here it is compared to NERF Rival. It is much more compact. And of course, this is foam. This is this weird, dense, rubbery material. It's heavier than NERF Rival, which is really interesting. Clocking in at about 1/3 the size of your standard NERF Rival HIR, NERF Hyper does do a few key things to make itself stand out from its brethren. For one, it isn't made of foam. No, seriously, it's not made of foam. If this is foam, I don't know what foam is anymore. NERF Hyper appears to be made out of some soft, rubbery, dense material that quite honestly lends itself well to being a safer projectile. It's dense and rubbery, meaning it keeps its momentum as it travels through the air. It's got dimples just like NERF Rival, but it's also smaller, meaning it has less surface area against the wind. Hyper really can go the distance. Think of it like a reusable gel ball material. And while they can sting a little if shot out of a blaster point blank into bare skin, they're flexible enough that it shouldn't cause any permanent harm. But of course, you'd never use something like this without any kind of safety eyewear, and every single blaster does come with rudimentary safety goggles. But if you want a little bit more added protection, they do also sell a NERF Hyper mask, similar to the NERF Rival mask, but much bigger. Nobody cared who I was until I put on the mask. Yeah, so this thing is, the lens is not exactly molded perfectly, so there's a lot of distortion when looking around, but you could definitely wear your glasses underneath of it, so that's something. Yeah, kind of like looking through a painting. That's not great. The NERF Hyper rounds themselves come in 50, 100, and 200 round packs, clocking in at $12, $20, under $30 respectively, which While it may be cheaper per round compared to standard Nerf darts, in the foam flinging ecosystem, it's really, really expensive. But as you can tell, NERF Hyper is a very durable type of ammo. As long as you can find it, you should be able to reuse it every single time. Finding it may be somewhat difficult though. While the ammo type is kind of a day glow green/yellow that makes it pretty easy to spot even in grass, the rounds themselves are, well, rubbery, and they are significantly bouncier than even NERF Rival. This, coupled with their small size, means you can expect to lose them practically everywhere. But of course, the ammo is practically meaningless by itself, so it's time to do a blaster roll call for the 3 new blasters debuting in the NERF Hyper line. Weighing in at $30 US, it's the NERF Hyper Rush 40. This hopper-fed top-slide prime pistol blaster carries up to 40 rounds and advertises hitting over 110 FPS. It works exactly how you would expect it. Load the blaster by opening up the hopper door located on the priming slide, shove up to 40 NERF Hyper rounds inside of it, although it only comes with 30, pull back the back of the hopper, push it back forward, make sure it's practically level or at least pointed down whenever you're doing this, make sure the safety is off, and pull the trigger to fire. The blaster is relatively compact, clocking in at about the same size as the NERF Rival Chronos, a fan favorite, but carrying almost 10 times the ammo. That is a very convincing reason to pick up the Rush 40. Swooping in at $40 US, we've got the NERF Hyper Siege 50, a pump-action shotgun-esque blaster that has a 15-round refillable hopper and boasts slam firing for emptying that hopper as quickly as possible. Another Springer blaster, simply lift up the lid to the NERF Hyper Siege 50, load it with up to 50 NERF Hyper rounds, close the lid, pull the priming slide back, push it back forward, make sure the safety is disengaged, and pull the trigger to fire 1 Hyper round. Hold the trigger down and continuously pump the blaster, with every forward stroke firing another Hyper round. And last but certainly not least, the NERF Hyper Mach 100. This is a fully automatic flywheel blaster powered by 6 D-cell batteries. You know the story by now. Open up the hopper, dump up to 100 rounds inside, close the hopper, make sure the safety is off, press in the rev trigger to rev up the flywheels, and then press the firing trigger in order to fire fully automatic NERF Hyper rounds. Well, that's every single blaster in the NERF Hyper line, but the question is, does it actually hit that 110 FPS claim they have written on the box? Because Hasbro has a little bit of a history of boxes not exactly telling the truth. All right, let's see how hard the Rush 40 is hitting. 117, 116, 101, 22, 11, 104, 118, 100, 105, 104. Every single shot above 100 FPS. Not too shabby. The Siege 50. 105, 105.9, 102, 80, 106, 88, 100, 96, 95, 95.6. Considerably weaker than the Rush 40. And now for the big Hyper Mach 100. 63. Not surprising, pretty hard to single shot, and also the most inconsistent, but that's what you get with flywheels. All right, let's see how reliable the rate of fire on the Mach 100 is. Yeah, it did that on its own. Oh my goodness. There we go. Holy crap. Pretty sure there's one more round in there. I just want to point out that this agitator system is definitely bogging down everything, but I have a feeling this blaster will work a heck of a lot better once you shove a stronger battery in it. So don't discount this thing quite yet. Well, that's the actual numbers, but how well does NERF Hyper work in practice? Being similar to gel blasters, airsoft, or a paintball marker, I had high hopes, and starting with the Rush 40, you can see that, well, the rounds actually do go a considerable distance for a stock NERF blaster. In fact, consistently, when the rounds weren't spiraling straight into the ground, they flew past rival range, and in some cases, flew farther than practically any other projectile I have fired in this range from a stock blaster. But the accuracy, especially outside, and it was a little bit windy, left a little bit to be desired. The Rush 40 does not feature any kind of hop-up, so that could be one of the reasons why. And I would not base the entire future of NERF Hyper off these three blasters in their initial offering. These two are making my job exceptionally difficult. Next up is the Siege 50. Being another Springer like the Rush 40, but including slamfire and pump action, makes this one a little bit more practical for a primary blaster. The little hop-up tab did make the balls actually flying down range a little bit more consistent without diving into the ground, but it wasn't really all that much more accurate. That being said, some rounds do go rather straight, and some fly exceptionally far. And finally, the NERF Hyper Mach 100. Being a flywheeler, it already wasn't going to be as accurate as the other two, and boy is that true in the range footage. And the rate of fire is pretty decent. In fact, it is so good that it's very difficult sometimes to squeeze off only a single shot. But again, for using stock D-cell batteries, I'm pretty impressed with the ranges that we can squeeze out of NERF Hyper, and these are mostly flat shots because I was worried about losing my precious Hyper rounds. Speaking of which, I thought this would be a bigger problem than it actually is, but NERF Hyper isn't exactly all that hard to find in relatively short grass. It's a pretty day-glow bright unnatural color, so I was able to retrieve pretty much every single round I fired with a little bit of searching. The ones that went into the tall grass, though, sunk in pretty far, and I never even saw them. So those ones are lost to time. Well, the NERF Hyper ammo is very interesting, and I think it does have a bright future for being a reliable projectile in the hobby. After all, there's a reason why paintball is balls and airsoft are little BBs, so Rival was foam balls, and these are less foam balls, and these do fix a lot of the problems that NERF Rival has, while instituting a few more that NERF Rival didn't have. For one, the balls are kinda like sticky, and nobody really likes sticky balls. This causes the rounds to kinda jam up against each other and form clusters, and that makes it sometimes pretty difficult to have reliable fire, especially when every single option in this initial lineup is a hopper-fed blaster. Not only do you have to worry about having the blaster's muzzle pointed upwards when you prime the blaster, meaning nothing falls into the barrel and nothing fires when you pull the trigger, but you also have to worry about jamming happen because these little rubber balls, God, I'm getting so tired of saying that, it feels weird every single time. These little rubber rounds will kind of friction fit into clusters. So you have to kind of like rattle it, which is a little annoying, but as expected with hoppers. I don't want to judge accuracy or anything too hard right now because it does seem like Hasbro is still kind of experimenting with this ammo, judging by the fact that only the Siege 50 had a hop-up in it, while the Rush 40 has a really tight barrel and the Mach 100 has a very open barrel. But it's clear to me that Hyper is meant to be more akin to Rival, where you get accuracy via volume of fire. You can carry a lot of Hyper rounds on you, and you can carry a lot of rounds in the blasters, which means if you miss one shot, well, you can just follow it up with more. The distance on some of these shots was very surprising, especially for a stock blaster. And considering they don't impact a lot of force when they hit you or anything, I can see where Hyper could have a very bright future. But what about the blasters? Starting with the Rush 40 in the cheapest option available at $30, it only comes with 30 rounds, which is absolutely ludicrous because due to its namesake, it's supposed to hold 40. However, remember that jamming issue? Well, you can fit 40 rounds inside these blasters, but chances are you're not going to want to because you're just going to jam up the hopper most likely. Starting to make a little bit more sense to me why Rush 40 isn't printed anywhere on this blaster. So maybe the Rush 40 was kind of only ever meant to hold 30, which is why it includes 30 rounds, but they figured they could call the 40 because you could technically hold 40 inside of it. That being said, having 30 or 40 rounds in a blaster this small, that's very competitive, especially with the distances you can get. It's very easy to use. It's pretty easy to reload, all things considered, and I really liked the Rush 40. In fact, spoiler alert, I think this was the best one out of the bunch by far. The Siege 50. Again, much like the Rush 40, you really don't want to fit 50 rounds inside this hopper. This thing actually struggles hard enough, at least my actual unit, to fire every single time you prime and pull the trigger, which is pretty disappointing. You really have to have it pretty much pointed downwards in order for this hopper to reliably feed, which isn't great because usually your target is down that way, and having it pointed downwards doesn't do you a whole lot of favors. In my professional opinion, I found the Siege 50 to be a pretty lackluster option, but at $40 and being the first Springer primary in the line, I'm really happy they at least gave us pump action slam fire right out of the gate, and who knows, it could only be my model here that's not functioning up to my standards. But the biggest blaster of the lineup in the Mach 100, which only comes with 80, and this one is the one that jammed probably the most. Yeah, it did that on its own. Oh my goodness. There we go. Holy crap. Meaning you can't get smooth rate of fire out of it most of the time? Yeah, this is a little bit of a tough one. The Mach 100 is obviously meant to be very similar to the NERF Rival Percy's. In fact, it's pretty much the same exact blaster. I found reloading this thing an absolute pain because the door just isn't big enough and the rounds are really bouncy and rubbery, and when you have something of this high capacity, you want to be able to reload it quickly, and I have a feeling even using the included hopper, you're going to struggle with that. If you're going to be running and gunning, the Mach 100 will serve you perfectly fine, and I actually have a feeling about this thing. Bringing up comparisons to the Percy's again, the Percy's was $100, this is $70, and a lot of people were upset that this did not include a rechargeable battery. That's something that I want to point out. This does not have a rechargeable battery in it. It has basic D-cell batteries. That battery door is huge. If you haven't already hit subscribe, I will only give you one more chance to figure out what I'm going to be doing this thing as soon as I shut off this camera. We're gonna shove a lot more power into this thing and see if that doesn't help the agitation, improve the velocity, and improve the fire rate. The Mach 100 is definitely accuracy through volume, and considering it's the first flywheeler in the entire line, I think they could have done a whole lot worse. At the end of the day, NERF Hyper does have a lot to offer. The rounds are about a third to fourth of the size of even the Adventure Force Pro Dart. And considering that airsoft and paintball can be extremely accurate, I think these things are capable of a lot more than what Hasbro is currently giving them. My main complaint with Hyper beyond the actual accuracy in this initial lineup is the hopper system. This kind of round, yes, it's really cool that it will work in a hopper, much like the Percy's or the Nemesis or the Prometheus in the Rival line, but I really feel like there's something missing here, like, I don't know, magazines. Obviously, NERF Hyper is a heck of a lot bigger than something like this, but these magazines can hold a lot of these little BBs, and it's really easy to refill these magazines. And I feel like an actual spring follower magazine will give a lot more reliability to feeding these rounds, on top of having a pretty extreme capacity. Obviously, this is something that the community will explore on their own, but it's something that I think Hasbro should try to jump in on, because that will be a huge benefit to this round in the future. Beyond everything, I think the Rush 40 is almost a must buy. Even if you can't hit every single target you're pointing at, having that much capacity in a compact package like the Rush 40, basically you cannot ignore that. The other two are a little bit harder to sell, but need I remind you, we're modders. But it goes without saying that Hyper is a heck of a lot more interesting than what we got with NERF Ultra. And I hate to say that because NERF Ultra has had a lot of time and effort dumped into it. And hopefully, in the same way that we saw so many different Ultra blasters in such a short time compared to other NERF lineups, we see the same thing with Hyper, and we see some really crazy cool stuff coming. Overall, much better than NERF Ultra. Blasters are not perfect, but they seem to have some kind of quality, but that's all I got for NERF Hyper. If I did miss something, please let me know down in the comment section, because I will be doing a follow-up kind of video with this kind of stuff. There's a lot to explore with these balls. I'm Walcom S7. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you watched it all the way to the end like this, chances are you like what I do, so please help the channel out, hit that like button, and if you are not, consider subscribing, because that is one of the best ways to help a channel, and yet 78% of my viewers are not subscribed. I can't wait to show you what Hyper does in the future, and of course, I hope to see you in an entirely different video.
You gotta up,